What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. Today we got a reaction to the Pet Shop Boys Top 10 Songs, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Richard. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out the Patreon link below or the patron link on the end screen. We could not do it without the patrons. If you haven't checked that page out, run a free trial. Go check it out. We can do a lot of cool stuff for you. All right. I know the Pet Shop Boys. I'm a child of the 80s, like I was born in 1971. So I know they're big hits here in the United States, but I know they're much, much bigger in other parts of the world. The UK, of course, but in a lot of other parts of the world than they ever were here in the US. So I'm excited to dive in to this one. If you don't know about them, I'm assuming you do because you're watching this, but I'll give you a little background. English synth pop band formed in London in 1981, consisting of primary vocalist Neil Tennant and keyboardist Chris Lowe. They've sold more than 100 million records worldwide and listed as the most successful duo in UK music history in the 1999 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records. 3-time Brit Award winners, 6-time Grammy nominees. Since 1984, they've achieved 42 top, this is all in the UK, 42 top 30 singles, 22 of these being top 10 hits, including 4 UK number ones. West End Girls, which is also number one on the US Billboard Hot 100. It's a Sin, a synth pop version of Always on My Mind, and Heart. Other hit songs include a cover of Go West and their own Opportunities, Let's Make Lots of Money, and What Have I Done to Deserve This, in a duet with Dusty Springfield. With 5 US top 10 singles in the 80s, they're associated with the second British invasion. Are some of those songs going to be in this top 10? Of course, but which ones? You'll have to watch. At the 2009 Brit Awards in London, they received an award for Outstanding Contribution to Music. In 2016, Billboard named them the #1 dance duo group over the 40 years since the chart's inception in 1976. That is quite the honor. They received NME's Godlike Genius Award in 2024, and they were awarded the Pop Pioneers Award at the MTV Europe Music Awards. All right, if you haven't heard this before, music won't be in the video, but it will be at a Vimeo link below. So click on that, follow on with this. Let's jump into it. With number 10, Domino's Dancing from the introspective album in 1988. Neil says the title of the song was inspired during a stay on the Caribbean island of St. Lucia. He said, quote, "In the evening, there was nothing to do except play dominoes. This friend of ours always used to beat us, and he used to do this celebratory dance," end quote. Despite this prosaic origin, domino dancing became Neil's metaphor for a love relationship breaking down because of jealousy. As he once described it, he created, quote, created a scenario of, a guy going out with a beautiful girl and all the guys are looking at her on the beach in a bikini or whatever, and they're all dropping dead before her because she's so gorgeous. And so consequently, he gets jealous and the relationship collapses, end quote. Lead single, 36 in Australia, 9 in Canada, 7 in the UK, and 18 in the US. I don't think I know this, though. Written by both of the guys and influenced by Latin pop. It was produced by Louis Martini, the Miami-based producer behind 1980s freestyle groups such as Expose, who had a couple of big hits. The song was recorded at his studio in Miami, resulting in a large number of studio musicians being featured on it for a Pet Shop Boys song. I'll let you know what songs I know. I don't think I know this song, but if it went to 18 in 1988, I very well might recognize it. I'm on the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Richard. Domino dancing. Some people thought this had something to do with AIDS and them all falling down, everybody dying. I don't know. But, well done. It's extremely well produced. This is what I think we're going to get on all of these. Extremely tight. I like his voice. And very catchy. They're smart at repeating the riffs and stuff. There's a reason why they were so successful overall and so successful in the dance realm as well. But good song. Next up at number 9, we got Rent from the Actually album in 1987. The third single from that album. It's about a transactional relationship between two people. According to Neil, the title was chosen for its association with Rent Boys with the intention of being provocative. But the story he envisioned for the song was about a mistress of a powerful man. He said, "I've always imagined it's about a kept woman, and I always imagined it's set in America. I vaguely thought of one of the Kennedys for some reason and imagined this politician keeps this woman in a smart flat in Manhattan, and he's still got this family, and the two of them have some sort of relationship, and they do love each other. It's all kind of secret." Now, it was remixed into a shortened version by producer Stephen Hague for release as a single. It reached number 8 on the UK singles chart, was not released in the US, which segues me into a point I meant to make at the start. A lot of the songs have all kinds of different mixes, as you're going to expect with dance songs and stuff. And this type of music invites itself to all these different mixes. When there's tons of mixes, I'm using the singles mix because I'm assuming that's what Richard heard and that's what everybody knows. And sometimes albums, songs of this type of music sound totally different. So I'm going with the single mixes, and hopefully you're pleased with that, everybody. And especially, hopefully, Richard's pleased with that. All right, let's get it. All right, Rent. Obviously, I'd never heard this song. The thing with these types of songs that are so well produced and put together is the lyrics don't have to be very good. It doesn't really matter because they're catchy, right? But the lyrics in both of these first two songs are really good. You know, I love you, you pay my rent. So we know what the relationship is, but we think that's the relationship of verse 1 and verse 2. But in verse 3, and look at the two of us in sympathy and sometimes ecstasy. Words mean so little and money less when you're lying next to me. So it changes because in the first verse, and look at the two of us in sympathy with everything we see. I never want anything that's easy. You buy me whatever I need. So now, there's some feelings involved, but we already set what the relationship was. I love you. You pay my rent. We have an arrangement, but well done. Next up, also from Introspective, which Domino Dancing was from 1988, Left to My Own Devices. Second single, 4 in the UK, 84 in the US. Neil called the song an exaggerated autobiography and explained his process in writing. He said, quote, "That's when I realized what the song was about, that this person goes through life always doing what he wanted to do. I like the idea of writing a really up pop song about being left alone. The song is a day in the life of someone, so it starts off with getting out of bed and being on the phone and drinking tea and all the rest of it. And it ends up with coming home. By this time, I was making the words very exaggerated and camp, though writing a book and going on stage were both things I'd wanted to do when I was young," end quote. It's produced by Trevor Horn and Stephen Lipson. Lipson took the Pet Shop Boys demo, which had a Motown sound, and added the popular house music influence of the time. So it opens with Sally Bradshaw singing the word house. An orchestra was recorded at Abbey Road, arranged and conducted by Richard Niles. Pet Shop Boys had not worked with an orchestra before, and they were initially taken aback by the arrangement. Lowe in particular felt it was too much. The arrangement was pared down, but they retained most of it on the track and continued to work with Niles on future projects. So we're going to listen to that single version again, but some of the different arrangements you can hear if you want to go look for them. You can go hear the Too Much Orchestra, according to Neil. You can go hear those things if you want to go search it out. But we're going to go with the down the middle single right here. Left to his own devices, he'd probably fall in love with her. The strings are odd on here. I don't think that they don't work, but I don't think that they're necessary. A well put together song, an incredibly impressive song. It's under 5 minutes long. It's got 9 verses, plus a repetition of the chorus several times. So that's pretty impressive. The pace of songs of this genre, you can get through a lot in a hurry, but usually it's just repetitive verses. Usually there's like 3 verses in these songs. So kudos to them for writing this thing. I mean, 9 verses takes us through a little bit of a journey, but well done. All right, next up at number 7, we got Heart from the Actually album in 1987. So songs 10 and 8 are from the same album, songs 9 and 7 from the same album. Fourth and final single, number 1 in the UK, becoming their 4th and final number 1 single to date in the UK. The genesis of the song goes back to the recording sessions for their Please album in 86. So this was 87. At Advision Studios. Neil wrote the opening verse on the way to the studio, and Chris composed the music on the piano. They were inspired by the song I Like You by Phyllis Nelson, which was mixed by Shep Pettibone. Originally, the duo had considered offering it to high NRG singer Hazel Dean, and they also thought it suited Madonna, but they ultimately kept it for themselves and asked Pettibone to produce it. The duo decided not to use Pettibone's version of Heart on Actually and asked Andy Richards to produce it instead. The single, which is what we're going to listen to, is Richards' original version featuring synth, drums, and J.J. Bell's guitar playing with a wah-wah effect, giving the song more of a 70s sound. The album version was mixed by Julian Mendelson with the guitar part removed. So this is one of those things, you got 2 different versions of it. So we're going to listen to the singles version. I have not known any of these 4 songs. I am going to know song number 6, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. They got me with that false ending, man. I almost paused it because I wasn't on the Spotify part of it. I was on the lyrics, but Heart, it's pretty obvious what it's about. He's in love with this person. I hear your heart written next to me. I'm in love with you. I mean what I say. I'm in love with you, and you don't know what it means to be with you. Beat, 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 heartbeat. Every time I see you, something happens to me, like a chain reaction between you and me. If I didn't love you, I'd look around for someone else. But every time I see you, you have the same effect. So, yeah, it's like when you see that significant other and the heart goes. I know 4 of Richard's top 6 Pet Shop Boys songs. This is going to be the first song I know on here. Always on My Mind from the Actually album in 1987. Originally a ballad written by Wayne Carson, Johnny Christopher, and Mark James. First recorded by Brenda Lee and then first released by Gwen McCrae. All the way back in March of 1972. Lee's version was released 3 months later in June 1972. The song has been a crossover hit, charting in both the country and western and pop categories. Elvis's recording was the first commercially successful version of the song. AllMusic listed more than 300 recorded versions of the song by dozens of performers. While Lee's version reached number 45 on the country chart, other performers reached the top 20 on the country or pop charts in the U.S. and elsewhere with their own versions. Elvis, John Wesley Riles, and Willie Nelson's Grammy Award-winning version in 1982, U.S. and Canada country number 1, U.S. Canada pop top 10. That was the version that I knew. So that was 82. This is 87. Pet Shop Boys, they performed a synth pop version of this on Love Me Tender, a television special on ITV in the UK commemorating the 10th anniversary of Presley's death. Featured various popular acts of the time performing cover versions of his song. The performance was so well received that they decided to record the song and release it as a single. Pretty cool story behind that. Became the UK's Christmas number 1, and I know it's a huge deal in the UK, edging out Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues, which is an absolute classic. Spending 4 weeks atop the charts, also reached number 4 on the US chart, becoming the duo's 5th and final top 10 hit on the US chart, and number 1 in Canada. Always on my mind. I think it's a really good song, but I also realize listening to it now, I liked it back in the day, I still like it now, but I like it because I liked it back in the day. A lot of this music is definitely 80s. It's dated, not in a bad way, but it's definitely of a time and place. There's certain songs, and a lot of music in the 70s is not dated. Disco obviously is, but so it's kind of weird, but the 80s music, you can definitely identify it. So I'm curious, what people think of this version. I guess if you're watching this video, you probably like the Pet Shop Boys, but I'd just be curious to find someone who just knew the Willie Nelson, knew maybe the Elvis, like, what do you think of this version? But I think it's really good. A good way to finish off the top half of this list. Now we go to what I believe is the first song I knew from them, West End Girls from the Please album in 1986. It was released twice as a single. Its lyrics are concerned with class and the pressures of inner city life in London, which were inspired partly by T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland. It was generally well received by contemporary music critics and has been frequently cited as a highlight in their career. The first version of their song was produced by Bobby Orlando and was released on Columbia's Bobcat Records imprint April of '84, becoming a club hit in the U.S. and some European countries. After they signed with EMI, it was re-recorded with producer Stephen Hegg for their first album. In October of '85, the new version was released, reaching number 1 in the UK and in the US in '86. 1987 won the Best Single at the Brit Awards and Best International Hit at the Novella Awards. In 2005, 20 years after its release, it was awarded Song of the Decade between the years 1985 and 1994 by the British Academy of Composers and Songwriters. And the Stephen Hegg version, the second version, what we're going to listen to, an entire week had been spent re-recording and rearranging just this song using Studio 2 at Advision Studios, housed with an Atari 24-track tape machine and an SSL console. The song, according to engineer David Jacob, was musically, quote, constructed with only 4 basic rhythmical patterns throughout, with no real instruments production-wise except for one cymbal. Keep that in mind when you're listening to it. The rhythmic foundations are laid down with an Oberheim DMX drum machine. In addition to that, the synth strings that run throughout the song were created using a blend of string sounds from an EMU Emulator 1 and an Emulator 2. The bass part is a composite of different sounds from an Emulator 2, a Yamaha DX7, and a Roland Jupiter 6, all of which were connected by MIDI. It had been played by hand to lend, quote, more fluidity to the track, although initially there was a bit of difficulty in keeping the part in time with the drum machine. I know you might not care about it, but it's interesting because they're playing it all out, but none of it's real instruments, but they played it by hand instead of programming it. But it's just interesting what the things we went through to create that, because in a lot of ways it just would have been easier to have the real instruments. The song features a cowbell-like sound, which is in fact a combination of a cowbell and an Emulator 2 choir sound recorded and spun in manually at appropriate places in the song. The trumpet solo in this version was played by Hegg on the Emulator. According to Jacob, quote, it took about 6 hours to get the trumpet to sound genuine, purposely playing wrong notes to make it sound more jazz. That's what I'm saying. 6 hours. They could have just had a trumpet session musician come in and lay it down in 10 minutes. The traffic noise which introduces the song was recorded by Hegg using a Sony Professional Walkman, we had one of those back in the day, outside the studio. In addition to the rap verses and choruses sung by Tennant, each using different microphones, one for verse and one for chorus, singer Helena Springs was brought in to sing background vocals. Parts of those were sampled into the Emulator to be used wherever they wanted in the track. In 2015, it was voted by the British public as the nation's 12th favorite 1980s #1 in a poll for ITV. In 2020, The Guardian selected it as #1 in a critics poll of the 100 greatest UK singles. Wow. 433 on Rolling Stone's top 500 greatest songs of all time, and 65 on their 200 greatest dance songs of all time. All right, high acclaim. I mean, I remember hearing this song. I was 14 or 15, depending on when it came out. I probably was not quite 15 yet. It definitely sounded different than anything that I had heard on, U.S. popular radio. Like this was a song that had just all kinds of stuff going on, from the almost rap style delivery that we talked about to just a different change up. So it's still a fantastic song. I mean, obviously incredibly acclaimed in the UK, but I think it's just fantastic. And I told you I knew 4 of the top 6. This is one of them I don't know. Number 4, Being Born from the Behavior album. In 1990, second single and produced by them with German producer, the great Harold Faltermeyer, Axel F. fame. It reached number 20 on the UK singles chart. It's concerned with the idea of growing up and how people's perceptions and values change as they grow older. The title originated from a Japanese review that accused the duo of being boring in reference to their, quote, famously deadpan presentation, end quote. The phrase reminded Neil of a 1922 quotation by Zelda Fitzgerald, quote, "She refused to be bored chiefly because she wasn't boring," end quote, which had been paraphrased on a party invitation from his friend Christopher Dowell in the 1970s. As teenagers in Newcastle, they had agreed that they wouldn't settle for boring lives. In a 1993 interview, Tennant described Being Born as, quote, "one of the best songs we've written," and said that, "For me, it's a personal song because it's about a friend of mine who died of AIDS. And so it's about our lives when we were teenagers and how we moved to London, and I suppose me becoming successful and him becoming ill," end quote. In 2023, The Guardian named this as the best Pet Shop Boys song. Not just one of the greatest songs about the AIDS epidemic, but one of the greatest songs written about mortality and memory. That is a lot of praise, man. I'm looking forward to hearing this one. All right, really good song. I mean, talking about some of the people that he kissed in the 90s. Some are with us, some are not. It just has that Pet Shop sound to it. So even though I don't know this song, it sounded familiar to me. Because I don't know it, it might be tough to get on my absolute faves list, but I don't know. But it's a song that I think if I listen to several times, it would really, really score high for me. It just has that sound. I would rarefied air top 3 song I do know, "It's a Sin" from the Actually album in 1977. Lead single came the duo's second #1 single on the UK singles chart. Also went to #1 in Austria, Denmark, Finland, West Germany, Ireland, Norway, Portugal, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and Zimbabwe. We're reaching #9 in the US. So I tell you that to show you the global reach, the continents, everywhere, #1 in all these different places. Neil came up with the phrase "it's a sin" when he heard Lowe play a piece of music that sounded to him like a hymn. In the lyrics, he describes some impressions he took from his time at the Catholic St. Cuthbert Grammar School in Newcastle upon Tyne. In particular, the teaching that sex is a sin except within marriage for the purpose of procreation. Tennant has said that the song was not intended to be serious. He said, quote, "People took it really seriously. The song was written in about 15 minutes, and it was intended as a camp joke, and it wasn't something I consciously took very seriously. Sometimes I wonder if there was more to it than I thought at the time, but the local parish priest in Newcastle delivered a sermon on it and reflected on how the church changed from the promise of a ghastly hell to the message of love," end quote. In the coda, Neil recites a part of the Confiteor in Latin, which translated into English is, "I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers, that I have sinned exceedingly in thought, word, act, and omission, through my most grievous fault." So just in case you don't speak Latin, that's what it's going to say. All right, "It's a Sin." This song is so wonderfully put together, produced. I mean, Neil sounds so good. So this song's 3 and West End Girls is 5, and I think a lot of you watching this might have an issue with that. I could be wrong. You might think West End Girls should probably be #1, I would think, from a lot of people. I get that. I think West End Girls is a more impressive song because of some of the things they do on it. I think this is a better song. It's my hot take. I mean, I'm in agreement with Richard on it, but it's probably a hot take to most of you. This song's fantastic. It's still fantastic. All right, another song that I know, which means sneak preview. I don't know. I've never heard the #1 song on Richard's list, but let's get to #2 first. "What Have I Done to Deserve This" from the Actually album in 1987. Second single, 2 in the UK and US, features Dusty Springfield. I'll get into more about Dusty in a second. Commercial success in both the UK and North America. It helped revive her career, led to a resurgence of interest in her music. Following the single, the Pet Shop Boys wrote and produced the singles Nothing has been proved and in private for Springfield, both included on her album Reputation in 1990. The song was originally written and demoed around Christmas 1984 with the assistance of notable American songwriter Allie Willis. It was originally intended for inclusion on Please, but the problem was to decide who would sing the other half of the duet. Various contemporary singers were suggested to them, but none of them seemed suitable for the song. Eventually, their manager's assistant suggested Dusty Springfield, whose 1969 album Dusty in Memphis was often acknowledged by Neil Tennant as his favorite LP. Let me tell you something. That comes with my highest recommendation. Trey and I ranked the top 10 albums from every year. You can go back and look at those album drafts, is what we called them. But in 1969, that made my list. Dusty in Memphis was fantastic. I loved it. An interesting story about that is while she was in the studio recording that, she told Atlantic Records, her record company, that there was a newly formed band and that one of the guys in the band had played with her in concert named John Paul Jones. And largely on her recommendation, they looked at Led Zeppelin and signed him. There's just a little free trivia for you. All right. According to Tennant, EMI, parent company of their record label, Parlophone, did not want them to work with Springfield, instead suggesting Barbra Streisand or Tina Turner for the collab. Springfield's popularity had suffered a major decline since her peak in the late 60s, and her last top 40 entry in the UK, How Can I Be Sure, was in 1970. However, Tennant was insistent on having Springfield record the song. I never defend record companies, but I do kind of see where they were coming from. They were wrong, thankfully, but initially within a few weeks of sending a demo of the song to Dusty's manager, word came back that she was not interested in performing the duet. So the duet was postponed. I love that, man. So the guys knew. Neil and Chris knew that they wanted her to do it. When she said she wouldn't do it, they didn't settle for someone else. They just put it on the back burner and did other stuff, right? At that time, Springfield was unfamiliar with them, but she had heard West End Girls on the radio and reportedly liked the song. Several months later, Springfield's manager contacted the duo, informing them that she wanted to record the duet. Dusty had no recording contract at this time. She was living in California and traveled to London for the recording sessions in December of '86. Chris Welsh of The Independent wrote that Springfield, quote, didn't know quite what the group wanted, but Tennant explained to her they wanted her distinctive, husky, breathy voice to feature. Tennant recalls the recording session with Springfield. He says, she arrived at the studio on time in a black leather designer jacket and high-heeled boots with blonde hair and black eye makeup, clutching the lyric sheet of the song, annotated and underlined. Chris Lowe, Stephen Hague, and I began to consult with the legend about how to sing our song, and she was very nice, surprisingly a little lacking in self-confidence. As if by telepathy, a Dusty fan appeared on the studio doorstep and was invited in to listen. Dusty's English secretary arrived bearing a new compilation cassette. They kept repackaging the old songs, the legend marveled. Then she went through to sing. Her voice was the same as ever. When she sang her solo part, Since You Went Away, everyone in the control room smiled. She sounded just like she used to, breathy, warm, thrilling, like Dusty Springfield, end quote. Written by Neil, Chris, and Allie Willis in early 1985, Classic Pop noted the song's somewhat peculiar structure reflects the way it was composed. Lowe wrote the riff and the music for the I Bought You Drinks, I Bought You Flowers section. Tennant came up with the verse, and Willis wrote the Since You Went Away part. Tennant wrote the majority of the lyrics while on the bus home from his job at Smash Hits. In a 2017 article for NME, Nick Levine called it possibly the greatest pop song in history, writing, we can chat hooks and unusual structure all you want. This song just has that thing. Before it's even finished, you already want to play it again. I haven't heard this song since the mid to late 80s, so looking forward to it. All right, what have I done to deserve this? A fantastic song. A complex song between Dusty and Neil. I'm actually going to show you the genius lyrics and kind of go over that with you. I don't ever do that, but you learn so much sitting in this chair with these headphones on compared to just listening. I don't do this for every single freaking song I listen to, right? Just on my own time. I don't sit there and look at the lyrics because it's a different kind of listening, right? It's an analytical, different way of looking at it. But you really learn like the complexity of this song, which I don't see this. And I'll just show you. It'll be easier to show you. So you're going to see it here, like on verse 1, Neil Tennant, then Dusty's in italics, and they're both on bold. So 2 lines for Neil, 1 for Dusty, 2 together. 1 for Neil, 2 for Dusty, 1 together, 1 for Dusty, 2 for Neil. So that's a much more complicated thing that you're going to see on almost any song. Like, I look at lyrics all the time. Who knows how many song lyrics I've looked at? We have almost 3,300 videos up, and I've been the one that shot or been a part of almost all of them. So I don't know, but it's so impressive. The song is so catchy. It's so well produced. They sound so good together. It's fantastic. All right, now we're going to get to Richard's #1 Pet Shop Boys songs. We got Suburbia from the Please album in 1986. It was re-recorded with producer Julian Middleton for release as the 4th single from the album, peaking at #8 on the UK chart and was the band's 2nd top 10 hit, of course, after West End Girls. And in their views, it saved them from becoming a one-hit wonder, went to 70 in the US. It was written in 1985. Chris composed the music, according to him. The bass line was inspired by Madonna's hit song of that time, Into the Groove, which is a fantastic song. Neil wrote the lyrics afterward. The song's primary inspiration was the 1983 Penelope Spheris film Suburbia and its depiction of violence and squalor in the suburbs of Los Angeles. The recent events of the Brixton riots of 81 and 85 were another influence. The lyrics convey the boredom of suburbia and the underlying tension among disaffected youth. The music's punctuated by sounds of suburban violence, riots, and smashing glass, along with barking dogs, a motif derived from scenes in that film. A completely new version was made for the single. This is what I'm talking about, right? Using barking dogs recorded at Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, audio of riots obtained from the BBC, and real breaking glass. Julian Mendelsohn brought in Fairlight programmer Andy Richards, who created a horn section sound with the synth line. Gary Barnacle played sax on the track. The single version is an edit of a longer piece called Suburbia, in parentheses, The Full Horror, which includes a spoken word segment with the refrain, Suburbia, where the suburbs meet utopia, and ends in a series of explosions. So obviously this is one of the songs that has several versions. We're going to listen to the single version, #1, Suburbia. Suburbia. My favorite part of that song is the higher pitched keyboard melody in there. It's just fantastic. It's so pleasant to the ears. It just brings a smile to your face. But I thought they did a fantastic job with this. The sound effects didn't sound cheesy with the dogs. I mean, they talk about the dogs. They're running with the dogs in Suburbia. And so it just fits. Sometimes those sound effects can sound, a little bit forced, but I thought it was a really good choice for #1. All right, now we're going to go to my favorite tracks. It seems like I got to make this speech a lot of time, particularly in Richard's top 10s. But, he's picking the top 10 songs of the Pet Shop Boys. So obviously, with the quality they have, they're all going to be good. And 8 of the 10 are going to be here on Honorable Mention and Faves. Honorable Mention, Domino Dancing, Rent, Always on My Mind, Being Boring, and this last song, Suburbia. Faves are going to be West End Girls, It's a Sin, and What Have I Done to Deserve This? And what I'll tell you about that, I try to be objective and not subjective, but I knew 4 of these songs really well. And 3 of them are my faves, are my only faves. So, there is a recency bias. The other songs are fantastic, and I could see on repeated listens how they would be elevated as well. But let me know what you think of this list down below. Something else should have been #1. What else should be on the list? But kudos to Richard for putting this thing together. If you haven't already, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, guys, I will see you.